everyone to this discussion about AI. I'm seeing a lot of new faces, and that's a good thing. So let me introduce a little bit about Mage-OS. But Mage-OS is a community-driven fork of Magento. That means that you get Magento plus a whole bunch of optimizations and extra features. And it is community-led, so you can participate in this as well. And I would like to especially thank all our sponsors today. There's Intune, Find Canary, MDoc, Integer.net, Develo, GH, Paradox Labs, JetRails, Hoova, and Vendic. And as this is a community-led fork, we are always looking for people to participate. This can be by creating and reviewing pull request, sponsoring us, creating documentation with stuff. We have tech meetings every Tuesday, so everyone that wants to get involved, please do. We would really appreciate it. And then why we're here, because this is something I'm seeing more and more lately. I'm a backend developer myself, and I used to live in PHP Storm. I had PHP Storm open all day. But in the last few months, maybe even the last few weeks, things have started to shift very rapidly. Where PHP Storm was my default, it's now more and more Cloud code. And I'm basically changing from a developer to a more like a code reviewer by this point. And I had this conversation with a few people that were seeing the same shift in how we are working. And that all led up to this point where I was like, yeah, this is a great point for discussion to see how everybody is experiencing this whole AI stuff. So let's get started with the question, where does AI leave Magento? Will it get stronger? Will it get weaker? Just different? What does everyone think?
I'm in. I think that generally speaking, I've written about this before, but these AI tools allow you to write more code. So the platforms that have the most code to be written benefit the most. So your Shopify's, your BigCommerce's, the things that are software as a service are going to see less. They may see more features available for those platforms, but the total value proposition, like the actual value provided by these tools, is lower because now you can hand all the developers all the tools, all the AI tools, and they can generate quite a bit more than they used to be able to.
Okay, good point. Good point. Anyone want to elaborate on that? I think Vinay also had an opinion about this. In one of our last meetings, he was talking about how Magento is well documented and that it really helps with AI tools to have a better understanding about what's going on and how to build upon that.
I'm happy to chime in. I just didn't want to, start talking because I talk too much anyway. But I think that's actually true. So my experience so far has been that due to the inherent training data that's compressed into the models, at least a couple of broad models since at least a year, they know Magento very well. They've been trained on the dev docs and Stack Exchange, and it's quite interesting even to ask them, like, okay, what training data regarding Magento do you know? Like, what have you been trained on? And they tell you. And I was trying to build a skill, like a Magento developer skill, but I only wanted to include stuff that isn't already in the model. Turns out there's not too much I could add. Just a few details maybe. So that was interesting. And then I've compared to some other projects, I found that over time, the agents stick much closer to how code is supposed to be developed in Magento, compared to, let's say, some greenfield projects where I quite often, if I let the agent free rein, I ended up with a ton of duplication of code and all kind of stuff. So the whole structure of Magento and the way it's set up is very agent friendly. It works great. So yeah, that was my experience at least so far.
Yeah,
That's what you were referring to, Mikhail, right?
yeah, exactly. And that's what I'm seeing as well. The code it writes, it's up to a pretty high standard in most cases. Sometimes you have to tweak it a little bit and ask it to refactor a little bit if it becomes too big. But overall, the produced code is pretty good. One thing that I'm questioning and I have heard this question before in other discussions about AI, but it's how should juniors work with AI? I've seen people that say like you shouldn't give juniors access to AI tools. What's everyone's feeling on that?
I have to wonder how many more junior developers there's going to be at this point, because I feel like AI has taken over that role.
Yeah, that's a good point, but still, I think there's still value in the skill of knowing when code is good code and how to make sure it behaves as expected.
True, but I wonder about things like, you know, turning on agents into automatic workflows and things like that. Like right now, I'm using an agent in my IDE, and it's pretty penned in. I'm not going off and saying, "Hey, write this feature," and then like going off and coming back an hour later, that kind of thing. I'm kind of keeping an eye on it. So I would think for juniors, it would be a similar process where you review what they're doing. I mean, they don't have the skill set to recognize when AI is doing things wrong, basically. So, if I had junior developers, I would probably try to keep them away from it, but I can't imagine how you'd be able to do that, especially with remote work and everything.
Well, especially with remote work, I know for sure that they will use AI.
Yeah. So you would have to really, I'm not sure how they would learn. That's the thing with AI, because I'm not sure I learn much about Magento from AI. It's more, I don't know, because I feel like I have a pretty solid ground with it from working with it for so many years. But if you don't, then I don't know what the effects are of learning from an AI agent are.
Yeah, but isn't AI taking the role over of knowing how Magento works? I know we do know how Magento works, but yeah,
Yeah.
and AI does either. So is it required to know what Magento does, or are we here to be more like a supervisor, and then the AI knows how to fix things if you ask it the right questions?
True, but in the context of junior developers, they don't necessarily. So, are junior developers capable of looking at what AI is outputting and recognizing bad patterns and stuff like that? So it's sort of like a vicious circle in a way.
Yeah. Anyone else has opinions about juniors in AI? How to handle that? Maybe someone has experience with that.
I can provide an anecdote. So we had a open source contributor contribute to Daffodil, and the individual is a 18-year-old first year at is in a CS program in Canada. Today is actually, unfortunately, their last day of their internship here, but they prolifically used Claude Code and Cursor throughout their internship. And I'll talk a little bit about the code review side of things, and I'll talk about like their learning experience. So, code review wise, for me as a reviewer and for the team as a whole as a reviewer, it was initially challenging because the individuals not particularly familiar with the code base, and the code base is an e-commerce code base. It's not necessarily Magento, but it's very similar in many ways. And they struggled in some ways because of the breadth of the code base. It's very large. They're also not particularly familiar with e-commerce. However, they can contribute in a variety of ways. One of the things that these AI tools provide, especially to junior developers, is the ability to explore. Previously, you may be unfamiliar with how the build system works, or you may be unfamiliar with like how a little library works, and so as a result, you go try to read it. Maybe the code's too hard for you to understand. It's not it's not immediately legible, so you stop and you maybe go on to something else. These tools allow junior developers to deeper explore areas. Now, the model is going to get things wrong. It may infer something that doesn't exist, or it may hallucinate something which is not actually in the code. But even if it's 95% correct, I'd say even if it's 50% correct, actually, that 50% accuracy allows them to explore where they previously wouldn't. Even if they happen to get it, like, how do I build this library, or how do I run these tests? Even if it gets that right 50% of the time, that's better than what they were doing before, where they never would even bother to try it. So I think in the case of Magento, I think we're going to see a really massive growth in the number of junior developers, because the platform, which was previously, Magento's always had this historical, this is really hard to understand and do. I think you're going to see now that with these tools, people can do a lot more, and so I think we're going to see a huge spike in the number of junior developers.
And that's a good thing. The more the merrier.
We also had a caveat to that I think is important, specifically with these LLMs. So the models are, if you think about what you're doing, it's not, I don't want to anthropomorphize a robot, but you're basically speaking with something. So developers who are more confident in communication, or who are more capable at like just day-to-day conversation, or they have a grasp of some basic terminology of what's going on in that particular, little section of the code base, they're going to be able to explore a lot more, like with a lot higher fidelity, whereas someone who is going to approach it really cautiously and, with a little bit of anxiety. So I think developers who, especially junior developers who are more outgoing and more, I want to say empathetic, I think you're going to see a lot more code from those people than you would from people who are a little bit more afraid of kind of just general communication. It's kind of a weird pseudo human behavior that appears in conversations with these models.
Yeah, I agree on that one. So I'm wondering, I'm assuming everyone in here is probably using AI some way or the other way. How is everyone doing that? I'm personally using basically just Claude code. I used to have this special playwright skill, but I found out that Claude knows what to do without that skill. So how is everyone using AI in their daily development work?
I'll say I mentioned before that I'm using Augment and Claude. Augment allows you to choose different models, and I'm using it in the IDE primarily, and it's a very hands-on approach. And Miguel would be familiar with CodeRabbit, which we're using for code reviews to sort of just get that first pass of code reviews. And that has saved me quite a bit of time to focus on other things when it comes to code reviews. But I am exploring the idea of, unsupervised agents to just pick off low-hanging fruit tickets and open PRs, but, a bit nervous. I'm curious about other people who have used that workflow. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to have it merge and deploy to production, but I'm curious about how well it works for that type of thing.
Yeah, I'm familiar with CodeRabbit. I can see the value, but I'm hating it.
If people don't understand, Miguel and I work together on the project.
That might be good to add here.
Yeah, and CodeRabbit was introduced recently to everybody's anxiety. But yeah, I'm curious about people that might be using, just really diving into multiple agents, just doing a whole bunch of stuff. Like, how have your results been? Do you find that you got to go in and just fix everything, or is it to the point where you think it might be able to just open the PR and deploy it? there's a whole spectrum there.
Yeah. Me personally, I'm experiencing a little bit with my own website, where I have a simple GitHub action that runs Claude and that is instructed to do something like find something to improve and create a pull request. And it's giving pretty good results. So every day it's something small, but it's always that you think, it improves a little bit, like a wrong close tag or maybe some missing CO tag or stuff like that. And
Interesting.
I know the Alcantis agency with PDApp, especially PDApp has talked quite a few times on the subject. They have the system where merchants can create an issue within their GitLab, and it is then automatically picked up by an AI. I'm not sure if they're using Claude or Codex or whatever, but that then implements whatever they ask, and it could be simple stuff like replace this blue button with a red color or something like that. And it tries to fix it, and then their pipeline with end-to-end test and code sniffers and all that kind of tools that will then validate if the change is correct. And in the end, if they all pass, a developer will take a look and then merge it.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
that's interesting. You know, it's kind of scary a little bit for especially their developers. You know,
Well,
and
definitely,
not
but there's always a
yeah,
human in the loop, so nothing gets
yeah.
worked without some human eyes on it.
yeah, that's what I also wanted. What PTApp also said is always keep the human at the end, the human responsibility. You can let AI do most of the work, but there's always the human factor.
Yeah, exactly.
That scanning speed, I think is really where I think the thought of AI replacing a lot of development work. I mean, it definitely replaces segments of it, but the one thing about the AI output is these things are prolific enough that they can generate a volume of code that unless you know exactly what you're looking for, what I mean, scanning through code, spotting potentially critical mistakes on the fly, that type of thing. It to me it's really an arena for your more experienced developers, just because of that review cycle of if you want to keep up with the robot, as it were. You can't be a dabbler because it's not easy to just scan code and have things pop out of you. And maybe if we spend a lot of time on a platform, um, that's the familiarity we bring to the table. But it's that, to me, is where this is kind of a there's a glass ceiling for people coming in. I think, as there would be even if they were just doing all the dev manually. But personally, right now most of my work all of my work really is not in Magento, which is odd and a strange thing for me. But it's kind of opened my eyes to the way this experience gets processed. Just doing not bulk, but a lot of production level Python for running AI models or training them or whatever the case is. I use Cursor, Copilot, CodeRabbit. Probably 3 or 4 other ones I'm forgetting the names of at this hour, but that's really where my job as just a general developer is totally changed, because the amount of code reconnaissance that I can do in 5-10 minutes, is insane. And I can't say, I mean, as far as turning features around, I'm probably turning around, a fairly decent complexity feature per day, which is not necessarily something I couldn't do, in a platform I was more familiar with, going back to like Magento Dev. But it allows me to contribute to that level, in an area that's not totally new to me. It's been a few years now that I've been working in this arena, but it's still not my comfort zone. So there's a real balance there. I think with the inexperienced developers, I think code reconnaissance, I would have just absolutely loved to have had that, like in the M1 days. Can you explain this thing to me? I mean, maybe that would have been a long conversation, but it's just an amazing tool for newcomers. But at the same time, I mean, it's a sword that should be wielded by somebody who knows how to use it.
Second, that I ask lots of questions about where stuff is, how stuff works, what could be better ways to do it, what's the potential downsides or trade-offs somebody made while, by implementing something in some way. And, it's something I enjoy a lot, actually. Yeah, so nice. Sometimes in a specific session, sometimes just as a by the way question while it's working on something else, just poking around, digging around. Nice.
Yeah, it almost makes the code base conversational at times, which has kind of been a dream of mine for a while, if I'm honest. So,
We have a question from Shia. Hi, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but the question is: does anyone know if there's an existing AI framework for developing Magento features with Cloud Code, something like OpenSpec, but focused on Magento architecture and incorporating best practices? I'm not really aware. I know that Hoova has some AI skills, but being that said, me personally never needed it up until this point. Claude will figure it out for me. But maybe someone else can, as an answer to this.
I find like there's no specific, as I know, no specific Magento specific spec-driven development framework. It's just regular spec-driven development, which I don't quite see the difference between Magento or other tasks there. Magento makes it kind of nicer if it's working on multiple modules at the same time that are kind of related. That's a natural boundary usually for different agents or for scoping in a specific way the work. But yeah, nothing Magento specific. For Hoover, we've had these skills that we published. We've got some more internal ones. Going to publish more too. But that's mainly because the models aren't that familiar with Hoover as they are with Magento in general. And Claude can figure everything out, but I found with the skills it's faster. Doesn't need to figure out as much and doesn't need to look at as much other things. In one or two corrections rounds less, so that's been useful. And interesting, also I found that Opus 4.7 actually is much better now at picking up the skills automatically, while for so far I've always been pretty much, I just explicitly told it to use a specific skill for something, or now it's suggesting even sub-agent use, I'll give it the skills. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, regarding spec-driven development, no, I just use no specific framework.
Vina, you just recently created the Magento 2 LSP server. Maybe that's a little bit on the subject. It's not really a framework, but more like to give Claude some information about overrides and stuff. Am I saying that?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, the reason was I wasn't satisfied using PHP Storm anymore. And then trying out different editors, I was missing the nice PHP and Magento insight that PHP Storm had with the Magento 2 plugin. So the Magento LSP is something like a language server protocol server, is something I wanted to build for a long time. But now with AI, it's one of these side projects. I just did it, and it wasn't a lot of work actually, thanks to AI. So that was great. So this gives a lot of information to the editors about how Magento works, about plugins and where the XSD files for certain files can be found, and observers and all that kind of how the relationship between PHP and XML files. And in regards to AI, it also includes the MCP server that can provide information to an AI, let's say about the merged XMLs, which an agent usually would have to kind of build this model about itself, like figure out what plugins exist for a given module, look through all the XML files, apply the right scoping or for front, base area and front end area or whatever, figure out which ones are active when debugging especially, and that information is readily available through the MCP now. So it again doesn't bring anything that Claude couldn't figure out on its own, but it speeds things up a bit.
I think
To LSP.
I think Justin has an interesting question. How is everybody handling security around? Well, you're saying Cloud Code, but I think you can ask about AI. How's everyone doing that security part? Is everyone sandboxing or maybe some other tactics here?
I do all coding with Magento and AI in code spaces. anyone wants to test it out, I'll put the link in the chat. But yeah, it's got gate guarantees. It's got no access to anything else. It can't break out of the cloud code space instance. That gives me some reassurance.
And to give some context, code spaces is I think within GitHub, like an
Yeah,
online container thing.
I think you get 50 hours a month free code space usage. So yeah, you just spin up a Magento instance, and yeah, I can guarantee that it's safe to run. Dangerously run permissions.
And you're using this for daily Magento development.
Yes. Yeah. I don't do a lot. I just do kind of a little bit on lots of projects, so it's kind of perfect.
Okay, cool. Anyone else has some opinions about the security part?
Don't trust it. I mean, that's my general rule with anything, But at the same time, whether that's code quality or code, relevance, just or the fact that things like Code Reddit tend to miss, seriously glaring things. I mean, that same, thought process has to apply to kind of to anything. But as a default, at work we just don't really trust things that are. I mean, if they're totally under our control, then that's one thing. But and there's a lot of different ways to skin that cat, as it were. I have a model server at my house, so I mean, when I'm running, against that, um, I really have no concerns. But strange things. I mean, it's again, I think AI is a great thing, but at the same time, let's be realistic here. I mean, it's only capable of so much, and I've seen it, do its best to try and leak credentials, things like that. So I can't say that we, um, being like a production AI shop, necessarily ever really take those blinders off, and that's kind of another factor where having some experience and knowing what you need to look for is really vital. I mean, because you don't always have the opportunity of throwing up a sandboxed environment or things like that. So the context, where we're using it, even on like corporate controlled things, um, stuff definitely will sneak by. So I think we default to just not trusting it past a certain level. As far as things that actually execute and stuff like that, I mean, that's back to sandboxing and all the other fun rules that one should follow. And you don't want to, tell Cursor it's got like, you can trust your entire home directory, obviously, because fun things will happen. But it's. I think those are the same rules we apply to everyday Magento dev. Do you know what I mean? Like it's treating it like a chatty new developer who you're not really sure about yet, I think is a good default position. Just because, again, incredible tool allows amazing force multiplication of myself, but there's that big caveat that you really need to taste the food before it goes out to the table.
Security and trust. One thing I wanted to bring up is there's a lot of the danger. Like sandboxing agent is super important, and I'm very happy that Jeroen is with us in the company, and he also helps, just bounce ideas of it and making sure it's not just me talking to people, colleagues. And I just wanted to add that we have this internal skills repo with stuff we wrote ourselves, but also we can add skills from the internet, but only after a security review, both by AI and human, and that's its own specific skill. And it's kind of fun. There's a lot of bad actors out there, and the ideas people have to inject prompts is crazy. And yeah, I think it's really important not to trust sources. Like anything that gets into the context from the outside is potentially dangerous. I mean, we've got a history of running npx commands, which is just as dangerous probably, but the same applies to AI. So it's a good idea to review that stuff really. And at the moment, our internal skills repo isn't that, like, there's not too much in there. But I hope people will pick it up and start adding pull requests so we can review those other skills and add them to our collection. And the idea is that's the only skills we use, at least in a work environment.
I just saw someone mentioning Laravel and that they have an upgrade command. Should we have something like that for Magento as well? Because Magento upgrades can be a huge pain in the ass. Okay, different question. um, using AI can be pretty expensive. How is everyone invoicing this kind of things? Do you invoice it to clients? Is that just part of normal operations? How is everyone doing that?
I had a question about that too. My client is paying for CodeRabbit, but I'm paying for everything else. And it's sort of a combination of increased productivity. So, compared to a couple of years ago, I'm shipping features a lot faster than I used to. At the same time, I'm paying on my own dime for the capability to do that. On the other side, if I pass that on to my client in a world where everybody's using AI, how do I justify that? So I'm curious how other people are handling it. I'm an independent freelancer, so not really working from an agency perspective.
I'd say from an agency perspective, we are just absorbing the cost at the moment. But I've seen discussions of token costs 10xing maybe in 6 months, or when the investments to the big companies start running out. I think token usage and optimizing token usage is going to get more and more important.
So for us, we use either the Cloud Code Max plan, or for some developers that don't lean heavily into it, we'll pay API usage. Sometimes we'll pay API usage on top of the Max plan to gain access to like the larger token models. About 6 months ago, we sent out a notice to our clients saying, "Hey, we're using Cloud Code to generate code. A human is reviewing every line. As a result, we're seeing huge productivity gains. And so, along with that communication, we also increased our rates. And pretty much universally, it was kind of understood and as a part of that justification is like, hey, we're being way more productive. And we also have like AI token costs. And that justification seemed to make sense to our clients of why we were increasing rates.
Cool. I hear they found that satisfactory.
Yeah, and I think especially when of late when we've turned things around very quickly, we've been making sure to point out, hey, like this was made possible, and we would not have even considered this as a thing, a few years ago, and so that has kind of reinforced the value of that.
To the agency game myself anymore, but I've heard from a number of our people that we work with that customers are expecting things for roughly 40% less because AI makes so much easier. It makes everybody so much faster and easier. Yeah, I kind of like your take on it though.
That's what I worry about, is especially as an independent. I mean, I basically have 2 part-time jobs. So I have value baked in, but at the same time, it's like, why are you increasing your rates when you're not writing the code anymore? I'm not sure every client would be as enlightened to understand that increase.
Yeah, and any of us in the agency world billing by the hour, I think it's a tricky scenario because it used to be there was a pretty direct correlation between hours and productivity output. But now, if you're seeing, a 50 to 1,000% increase in productivity, completely changes the picture. Now, some people are saying, oh, you should move to fixed bid billing or like delivery billing. Very hard to do when you're working with merchants in an ongoing context, versus where I've typically seen that be more successful is if you're like pricing out a full implementation and maybe you're saying, okay, it's going to be a $200,000 fixed fee.
Yeah, definitely something I don't really feel like tackling, along with everything else, hoping it goes away. This idea of like, I might try to pass on some of my AI costs to my client, though. I don't know. I'm considering it. Getting the max plan, for example.
Isn't that also part of the hourly billing? I mean, if you bill, I don't know, 100 hours a month, then the Claude Max plan is like $200. Is it like an increase of $1 per hour or so? That is neglectable.
Yeah, that's true. But it's almost the principle of the thing. Like, I'm giving you so much more output and I have to pay for that.
Oh yeah,
This stays between us, Mikhail.
Yeah. But then you can have a discussion about isn't the cost of code declining very fast.
Yeah, which is kind of true. I mean, everybody's vibe coding, and there's a lot of people out there that are, it's sort of like the boot camps. The boot camps were popular for a while, but there was suspicion about the capabilities of people that just went to like a 1 month boot camp or something like that. With this, I think everybody's slapping a shingle out and saying, "Hey, I can write code for you." Or maybe they're not, but I do think that it's, there's going to be a lot of people out there vibe coding and shipping it, and you got to be careful about looking at their background to make sure that they actually know what they're doing. Or am I just being paranoid?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
So, Mikhail, I'm not sure if you're good with this, but I'm curious to hear from people that are running Claude Code dangerously skip permissions, and specifically how they're kind of loading up. I guess we talked earlier about the GitHub feature, and then Vinay, you had dropped a link into Agent Safehouse. Is that something that the whole Huba team is using, or is that just you personally?
We have we're goal is everybody sandboxes agents all the time. We talked about it a couple of times so far and did like a session showing people how it works and shared, like documented the stuff, how, a quick setup on your instance and so on. So my goal is I'll get back to everybody and check back in. Hey, are you actually using this? Because that's the goal. To be honest, I think it's currently probably in kind of a some do, some don't situation. But where we're headed, the not too distant
Yeah, because
future.
so in a brand new project in an isolated environment running Claude Code dangerously skip permissions, I have seen it produce incredible results very quickly with no hand holding. Versus full auto, as someone just mentioned in the chat, where there's a lot more requirements to accept, accept. So that's why for me, dangerous skip permissions is interesting in trying to run it in a more sandbox environment. But then how much effort is required to get a fully running like Magento Docker inside of that?
Like that's the nice thing about the Docker image that you used, or also the Agent Safehouse is it's like the Agent Safehouse stuff took me, I think, maybe 4 hours plus 1 or 2 hours of tweaking over the next couple of days to set up, and now I don't even notice it anymore. So feels like zero additional overhead. Yeah.
Got it.
I actually took a pretty deep dive into security the last few days, and I don't have a full conclusion yet. But from what I understood, the best solution is always sandbox it one way or the other. And there are various solutions. You have Safehouse, then there's Docker, and I think you can also do virtualization even more. And personally, I'm now working I'm installing it within DDEV, and that's working pretty fine, but it's a bit of a hassle with tokens to set up and stuff like that, because you either have to authenticate each project, or you have to make sure that you do one authentication and then have that token copied into every container, and that can be a bit of a fiddle around. But I don't think that there's really a good solution, one size fits all solution for the whole security issue at this moment, at least. That's my conclusion for now, at least. It differs very much.
Got it.
So I have another question. In 12 months from now, or maybe even further, where will we be as a Magento community? Has anyone got an eye into the future for that?
Well, I think it's pretty phenomenal that Katie Wilson's kind of back in the fold at Magento Association. Don't know if many of you saw that announcement, but she's coming in as the new executive director. And I worked with her for quite a while at Magento, and she, just always just rave reviews. A partner to work with, so I expect her to bring that.
Sorry, I think you're breaking up a bit.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, they just evidently cellular phones is like new here in the States. So hopefully you can hear me. Katie Wilson coming in, Executive Director, Magento Association. I worked with her for a while. Always rave reviews from partners. Just absolute hard worker, thinks things through. And I'm hoping she brings a lot of that energy with her.
Okay, cool. I don't know her personally, so let's hope that.
If I have to, I can give what I think a forward-looking statement would be in like 12 months from now. So I've had a couple of conversations with folks over the past couple of months about this, but I think we're going to get to the point where there's going to be a button for any merchant to click on that button and spin up a local or dev container version of Magento in that environment. And with any luck, we also have at that point in time the ability to like one-click deploy it to a production environment. So I think we're going to see a tremendous number of vibe-coded stores. One of the things that we're going to have to be cautious of, as with everything with Magento, is the ecosystem around Magento is somewhat sort of like WordPress. So if Magento has the ability to proliferate in much the way kind of WooCommerce did, security, and not just of the code that we're writing, but security of all of the stores that exist on the earth are going to be, a big problem to solve. But I think we're going to see more growth in the next 12 months than we've seen in the past 5 years, if I had to guess.
Yeah, that would be great. I spoke to someone that used to work in the game industry, and apparently, I don't know, quite a few years ago, that there was this flood of people creating games because the barrier to create games was way lower at that moment than the time before. I think because there was some software making it easier. And they told me that it caused this flood of low quality games getting out there because everyone can build something, but they don't know about how to build proper games. And is that a little bit what you're referring to here, Damien? That we're getting a whole bunch of low quality stuff because they can, but they don't know really how.
Yes and no. I think there's going to be. I think the percentages will remain the same. I think just like a naive person can make a Magento store, I think we're also going to see people who aren't as naive make Magento stores. So I think percentile wise, it'll probably be around the same. So you'll see, if today 20% of stores are great and 80% of stores are questionable, I think you'll see that same breakdown 12 months from now. But I think the number of stores may like quadruple or triple, something like that. But as I said, the thing there is if 80% of stores are bad, if there are 100,000 stores today, that's 80,000 stores, and then by the end of the year, if there are 240,000 stores that are questionable, that's a lot more Sandsec subscriptions. Let's just say that.
I think there's like a good impact that maybe from this to Magento industry as a whole, because right now, like the cost of ownership of Magento website is higher than in most of the cases for D2C. In most of the cases, higher than Shopify, and therefore, if AI will help decrease the cost of ownership and cost of growth on Magento platform, in such a case, Magento became again more competitive, and therefore maybe like if there'll be the growth of amount of new Magento stores worldwide, I think it will be in general positive. Even like if the quality of the stores will be like not ideal, they can be used as as the MVPs, and then if the merchants will start getting the sales using those stores, they will start investing more into working with agencies and increasing the quality of those stores.
Talking about looking forward, I think we're going to see a big change in impacts to extension vendors. Like, we're going from a place where it takes a lot of effort and maintenance to keep up an extension to where anyone with a coding subscription can spin up a pretty decent clone of pretty much any solution in a weekend. Or merchants can come up with their own features and solutions for what they need. So that's probably going to keep squeezing out some of the vendors and result in changing pricing models, which I think we're already seeing a lot of.
More consolidation. That reminded me what you said of this presentation David Lambauer did week on how we won this pitch against Shopify, and not on features, but on data ownage, and the idea being features are easy to create now, easier than ever. So having full access to the data and control of the data, so you can build the features that work on your data the way you want it to, is even possible without restrictions. So that was very interesting, very nice. I'll just drop the link to his post on it. The talk he gave was a lot more extensive, but still, that was a very cool talk. Very cool.
Ryan, you're talking about the future for extension developers, and that's one of the things I think we've struggled with for a long time is do we get an off-the-shelf extension to make it work, or to build something custom? A lot of off-the-shelf extensions from some of your main vendors kind of do a lot of things, touch a lot of systems, and we talk about it kind of being like just wrapping their tentacles around the system. So more and more we're gravitating towards small, very purpose-built extensions, especially if we can reuse them across clients. And so I think we're going to probably see more of that. We try to open source things when we can. I think that's kind of the future, is going to be just small purpose built and no longer installing these more monolithic extensions that do everything you could possibly imagine when it comes to like affiliates or things like that.
I'll also say, based on the kind of my earlier assessment of 12 months from now, I think now is a great time to be an extension vendor. It may initially seem kind of scary, but I think as we're going to see a massive growth in the number of stores, we're going to see a massive growth in the number of purchases or subscriptions. At the same time, it may be someone in here who starts their own kind of extension company, wholly drives it through AI, and they blow away the competition because maybe the competition's a little bit slower at uptaking AI. But I think we're going to see growth in the number of extension vendors. Maybe we see like an Evan Yu like individual for extension vendors. If you don't know, that's the guy who created Vue.js. Someone who's really diligent and very good at making extensions, and they blow away the competition. But I think we'll see a growth in extension vendors as well as merchants. There's going to be initial competition, or there's always going to be competition, because where there's available capital, there's competition. But I think we'll see a large number, or a large proliferation of extensions.
I was going to say, as a merchant developer, we would still value a extension or project that is well maintained with security in mind, and we can inherit and receiving the update. But meanwhile, we would like vibe coding more our own customizations. So extension that is providing the base feature is still very valuable. Those kind of things, but not feature-wise, I would say.
Also, a lot of agencies with in-house extensions. That's probably growing a lot in many cases too, I guess.
Oh, having in-house extensions also means having a burden on maintenance for that extensions.
Yeah, but what I mean is they have been doing that since 10 years or whatever, and building that and maintaining them and using them for the customers. And, if they're investing into working with AI and learning how to use it, etc., that will also be reflected in their extensions to in both ways, good and bad. So potentially good, growing the number of quality, or potentially bad by just sloppifying them. Who knows? But we'll probably see both.
Also make a point. There's a lovely talk by Bob Martin, Robert C. Martin, if you guys know him as Uncle Bob. Pardon his politics, because he's a bit of a strange one. But he has a lovely talk called The Scribe's Oath, which talks about what it means to be a developer and some historical context on how scribes were perceived in ancient society. But the point of the talk is basically that as developers, we have the ability to read the code that nobody else can read. We're kind of sort of getting to a point where anybody can read the code. We're not quite there yet, because obviously the AI can just lie to you. Granted, a developer could lie to a business person just the same. But I suspect that as that happens, I think what we're going to see, or we may see, is licensure, where only certain individuals are qualified to operate on code bases, somewhat like the certifications of today, but perhaps a little bit more strongly enforced. I don't know if that will happen. It just depends upon whether or not we establish trust in the ecosystem, if people can be trustworthy or not. But I believe something like that may occur, depending upon the how this next 10 years progresses.
That's an interesting point. And I mean, I guess the real thing there is that, it's anyone can, now query code architecture and functionality, but it's really about knowing what questions to ask, in the first place, and being able to both understand and assess the veracity of the results. It's a really good point. Definitely look up that Uncle Bob article.
But asking the right questions, there's probably always a topic that will be there. But looking at how AI has progressed the last few years, doesn't get the barrier to ask the right question keeps getting lower and lower. Where in the beginning of AI, you had to be pretty specific to get a valid answer. Nowadays, you can ask a question against the code base and Claude will figure it out. Won't that progress anymore? I don't know how the future looks, but where you can select a button and then say I change this color and it will do everything for you. Meaning that the right question, well, it changes what the right question is. That's what I'm trying to say.
We're just abstracting up.
Exactly. I think I have one last question for today. We are all here as a community coming together. What should the community do next with AI?
You mean like feature or something?
I don't know. Whatever. AI is here. AI is to stay. Yeah. Damien says build.
Yeah, for me, I think sharing knowledge is always something that I've been interested in, and I try to share, not hold things back, but just share openly. So I'm curious where people are congregating. There's some discussions that happen on LinkedIn. Are there a lot of people discussing here in Mage-OS? There's the Mage chat Slack. Where are people most interested in discussing how they're optimizing AI development with Magento?
Most of that discussion that I follow is happening in the Mage chat, the paid one. But that's a nice discussion happening there. That's been enjoying.
Not to discourage people from Mage chat, but maybe we do more of that in Mage-OS.
Yeah, that would be nice too, definitely. Rick just wrote, he creates in-house smaller purpose-built models. It would be nice to read a bit more about what you do in there. You take a model and then train it further, but maybe that's out of scope for this discussion. But that would be something nice to start a nice AI discussion here, for example.
I mean, I think strategically, this is a real moment to curate, right? Because there's plenty of noise and the opportunities seem boundless. So, if we as an ecosystem can really help build, sort of bound the different, problem domains, and you be able to deliver messages to the market that help people, really understand the opportunity, and that's basically a signal of maturity that, basically if we get there first, that really helps. I think that helps, any flavor of Magento or Adobe Commerce. And I think actually the point about, I think there's a real, the people depending on code tools, whether it's Codex or Claude Code, there's going to continue to be rug pulls as that, that early VC subsidization, is basically replaced by the need to actually generate revenue once you have captive audience. So I think there will be interest in businesses having local models, so there's probably some opportunity there to talk about just in general, hey, get started with, Codex or Claude Code or whatever, but then, you probably want to run this through some kind of orchestration. So if you need that kind of hot swap, or your token budget's getting out of control, you can, do what you offload what you can and should to local models that are really well trained. I know Mark Schust has done some of this. I'm sure others have. So really creating at an ecosystem level, creating a space where we can come together and start having these discussions. Yeah, I would very much like to see that. That would be just that would pay off for everyone, merchants included.
You know, one thing I've noticed, I think, is that the exposure to Magento and Magento fluency and just the process of becoming a Magentician, which is a word I just made up, but I think it really lends itself to getting on the production side of creating your own AI, just because we're used to so many strange data things and, whatever it is. I mean, a lot of the difficulty there really are in problems that you've already solved. If you've done a lot of integrations or migrations, especially feeding a new e-commerce site and feeding a new AI model to build e-commerce sites or to solve some personal pain point. I mean, the only difference is the e-commerce requires much more data. I mean, and I'm being completely literal with that, but I think it would be awesome to bring. I mean, if there's a place for awesome AI discussions, I'm there, because if there's one community I think that could really find great ways to exploit the tools that we have at the time we have them, i.e., more recent stuff, it would be this community. So that would love to tune in on that sometime.
Okay. I know what I'm going to read now. Training prompt encoders. Okay, haven't done that. Already looking. That's right.
Great. I think I'm going to thank you all for joining. I had fun. I think it's a great idea to have these kinds of conversations. Thank you, Vinhai. To have these kinds of conversations more often. Some things I picked up is about security. I don't think anyone here has a solution that fits for everyone. Safe House is being used quite a lot, but yeah, everyone's figuring it out as we go. And another thing that another saying that I liked was taste what you're serving, meaning that whatever you create with AI, always make sure that you know what you're shipping out. You can always keep an eye on it. And I think the nicest one here is from Damien about the future. Is that if he is right, then in 12 months Magento will explode, and we get a gazillion more stores. So yeah, thank everyone for joining. Feel free to hang out in here. Have more discussions if you will. Make sure to become a member or start sponsoring Mage-OS. We can really use it. We would really appreciate it.
Jesus.
So thank you all.
Thank you, Mikhail.
Thank you very much.
Take a look
Thanks.
at the link and become a Magento 2 maintainer if you have time. We are taking submissions.